Hi, everyone. How's it going? I'm Bonnie Violet, trans femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, digital chaplain.
I'm Pacey, transmasculine, non-binary, recovery, and mental health advocate.
And welcome to Trans Joy Boise podcast, where every story, laugh, and act of joy is a stand for our community. We'll get there.
We uplift bold voices, share real experiences, and celebrate trans lives thriving.
Tune in, connect, spread the joy. Because trans joy is unstoppable. Trans joy is so much better than me learning my words. Anyway, we'll get there.
Perfect. It's fantastic.
Oh my goodness.
And this week we have a guest with us, and we're really excited to have Nikson Mathews with us.
Yeah. I am not as polished on the intro for
Oh,
myself.
like we are.
You all just nailed that. So yeah, I'm Nikson. I use they, he pronouns, identify as genderqueer, transmasculine, and I'm really excited to be here. So, some of the background, we talked a little bit about it. What do I do? So within the community, I am the state chair for the Idaho Democratic Queer Caucus. I am the policy and community advocate with Add the Words Idaho, so I've been doing some work there as well. I'm just trying to live my life and find some joy as a trans person in the state of Idaho. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we are so glad that you're here. You're like our first official guest on the podcast, and I think it's
I'm
so
honored.
perfect. Yeah, definitely one of the first people we thought of when we were thinking about who to have on the podcast.
I
So
appreciate that.
I think especially right now with it being the
Mm-hmm.
legislature.
Legislative
Where do my
session.
words go for this? What are we doing right now?
Today.
So, yeah, we're in the 2025 legislative session.
Yes.
So you were like basically
I
there.
was
You
getting
got it.
there.
You were right.
Yeah.
And everything is so unbelievably heavy right now.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to have, trans voices, not only, here to inform everybody, but in official government settings.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Representation is so important, especially now. We need to be able to have people who have a say in the matters that are impacting their day-to-day lives. And these are the issues that impact us directly as LGBTQ folks, as trans folks. But we talk a lot about intersectionality and all of the issues that impact our lives. So that includes housing and education and healthcare and all of these things beyond just the really terrible bills
Mm-hmm.
that are trying to take away our rights as human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many trans folks are kind of lobbying or actually at the state house right now?
That is a really good question.
Just to put you on the spot.
Well, I know I am. I know that there are like a few in different types of capacities.
Right.
Hardly any.
But there's not is there an organization there's no organization that really even focuses just on trans folks. Is that correct? Or is there?
Within the lobbying,
Mm-hmm.
no. But usually it is like LGBTQ focus. So like the Idaho Democratic Queer Caucus, we're situated within the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
And so our work is partially legislative, and it's also partially within the party to bring in more representation and make sure, like, as a party itself is learning,
Mm-hmm.
becoming informed, and then also like advocating and standing true to the democratic values that they espouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as far as lobbying, though, I know that there are people who do this work. I don't know if there's any other registered lobbyists who are trans, and I'm so sorry
If we're missing,
if I am missing
Yeah.
anybody, because there are trans people involved in the work, but in terms
right, yeah,
it's minimal, and it absolutely should be more.
yeah.
What about with things changing? Like, it seems like trans and non-binary folks are just being completely erased by this administration. So I worry because I look at you and I think that there are so many folks right now that are feeling completely helpless.
Yeah.
And they see someone like you that is actually in a position, or with people that are in the position to actually make change. And I think that the erasure of, us is going to kind of eliminate that source of hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. And that's what is hard, right? Because, we see with the executive orders that Trump has signed, and I was recounting and going through as best I could this morning, which is a depressing way to spend a morning.
Right.
I think there's 11, maybe more that I'm missing that either directly target LGBTQ folks. Let's be honest, primarily trans folks, and that just goes down to trans women of color, etc. Right? 11, I think, maybe more.
Yeah.
But Idaho has, or 10, I think is what it is. Idaho has 11 bills that have been introduced targeting the LGBTQ community, and it follows the same line, primarily trans folks. Right? And so we're seeing this massive influx of anti-LGBTQ, anti-trans legislation that is terrifying. Yeah. And it is all meant to erase us.
Right.
Literally, we passed a sex and gender bill last year in Idaho that makes sex and gender a synonym, right? So effectively, we lose our identity in Idaho statute. Well, this year, Trump signed an executive order doing the same thing. So it's
on a national level.
On a national level. So we're ahead of the game on this one.
Yeah.
Good
old Idaho.
Yeah.
Good old Idaho.
Good old Idaho. We're finally, I usually, we're so far behind, but and this, we're ahead.
And what other, can you speak to some of those bills? I know I saw you give testimony on a medical kind of where folks could choose not to serve a person because of their own personal beliefs in like a hospital setting or.
Yeah. So that's called the Medical Defense Act. I can't remember the number right off the top of my head. But essentially what it does is it allows healthcare providers, everything from a doctor to an insurer, to deny care based on personally held religious beliefs. Now, when the sponsor of the bill, who is Skog, Bruce Skog, came forward and he talked about this bill, and all the people who testified, it was really clear this is about gender affirming care. They talked about vaccines and vaccinations. They talked about abortion, but primarily it was, I'm a doctor, I'm a healthcare provider, and I don't want to provide gender affirming care. Don't make me do that.
Got you.
This is like particularly dangerous. And I think is a really good example. Like this kind of legislation isn't just harmful to trans folks, even though it is clearly directed. You grow up in I grew up in a town of 250 people. You come from a small community. You have one doctor and they say, I don't want to provide you care. What is that person left to do?
Yeah.
And so this impacts everybody and it's absolutely unethical. And so that's one example.
And is that happening at a national level too? Because I thought I was reading something recently through the ACLU that was also talking about how some folks maybe would go to like a neighboring state to receive care or whatever, but even that is potentially going to be blocked in some way. Or is it a state to state kind of situation?
So right now, my understanding is it's state to state. That does not mean it couldn't change. But you've got like Washington State, who is like doubling down on protecting trans rights, access to abortion, access to all of these good kinds of care. I was literally just like scanning through some of the legislation that Washington State is introducing. And I'm like, we could be like actually taking care of people. How beautiful.
Right.
That act is concerning to me for a number of reasons, because we've seen these before where it's like it's anyone who provides care, right? It's first responders. It's even when I was reading it, even a pharmacist can say, so like you can jump through all the hoops. You can finally find a doctor who is like, I'm going to prescribe you your HRT, and then your pharmacist can be actually that goes against my beliefs and just and that's okay. And I feel like you're exactly right. It's opening the door for any kind of prejudice to be acted upon just with this hatred and refusal to care for people.
Yes.
And it's starting with us, but it's not ending with us.
Probably birth control as well. I know abortion really isn't an issue now because we're in Idaho, but like there's still access to birth control would probably become even less.
Yeah, it is literally any sincerely held belief that somebody could say, I don't want to do that. Now there's supposedly provisions in there of like, and I mean, and it's written in there, they have to let the person know that they won't do it for that reason so that there can be somebody else who comes in and does it. But we're, again, talking about a state that is very rural, right? Where access is limited already. And if we have a lot of doctors and providers and insurers who feel this way, how many people do you have to go to?
Mm-hmm.
The other aspect, and I'm a big this is a horrifying bill. It's incredibly harmful.
Mm-hmm.
And also I like to be really clear on the reality of it so that people understand it.
Yeah.
This does not apply to emergency care.
Okay.
A person cannot deny emergency care based on closely held beliefs,
Gotcha.
which is an important distinction.
At least
right.
Some good news.
But healthcare was never meant to be about emergencies.
For emergencies, yeah.
Healthcare is so much about prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are not doing that kind of healthcare, that's going to lead to more emergencies.
Yeah.
What about the SAVE Act?
The SAVE Act.
That's this one's wild, everyone. Like every time I look at the news, I'm just like, what level of idiocracy are we on today? And this one is where anyone, and they're saying that it's aimed at women mostly, which is not great, but it's going to be the trans and non-binary community too. It's your legal name has to match the name on your birth certificate in order for you to be able to vote.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I need to look this one up.
Yeah, it's called the SAVE Act.
Okay.
And that's at a national level, right?
I'm not sure, but
I
was
saw
introduced.
A woman from Utah talking about it on TikTok. So I think it's more of like a national.
It's not one I've heard in Idaho.
Yeah,
I'm pretty close to those, but it's definitely something I will look into.
Yeah, because it's gross.
Well, and when Trump, one of the executive orders that Trump signed was one rescinding many of the Biden administration protections or executive orders, 7 of them being protections that were focused on the LGBTQ community, including a voting one. And so, we're looking at the executive orders that he signed that were horrible. Well, he also rescinded a bunch of them. And this is all heavy and hard, and it's dark, rightfully so. And I will say that's why I'm so grateful for organizations like Trans Joy Boise and some of the other organizations in Idaho who are really focused on building community.
Yeah.
Because we have to do that.
Yeah.
This is a long game. This is not something we're changing immediately.
Well, and it's like I don't know how you do it, to be honest, because I feel like so powerless as it is and kind of like what's happening politically. So I think that's why a lot of our work has been about trying to take care of people right now in the moment, regardless of what's happening. But like you go every day, or you go there most days, and you're talking with these people that a lot of the times they don't care. Right. They don't seem to be open or interested. How do you, first of all, thank you. And second of all, like, how do you get up every morning and do that?
I mean, like some days are harder than others. Like, I mean, I'll just be like honest. I've absolutely had some like breakdowns where I have just like sat and cried because it is so heavy and it is hard to keep doing this work. And it's painful to show up and to talk to people and be like, I am a human being. My community has so much humanity and beauty and like the wonderful people.
Right.
And to have them just kind of look through us and still push bills that are really harmful. So, just like we are building our community, I am lucky to work with people who I don't have to do this alone, who are, talking to them on text messages or, we're doing phone calls, whatever we need to do, we're all supporting each other because this is really hard work. But for me, and I think this is something that anybody who wants to, and however you want to get involved, find the thing that you get kind of excited for. I don't know, maybe I'm a masochist. I don't know. The thing that gives you a little bit of energy, the thing that you feel like you do well.
Yeah.
And let that be what you focus on. Yeah. I ran for office
about a year ago,
yeah.
For the primary.
I ran in the primary for District 16. And I found that this is something that I really enjoy doing is talking about politics, talking to legislators, talking to organizations about and lobbying. And so I have built some trust and networks. I have a lot of privilege. I'm a transmasculine white person with a beard, and I can walk through that place and have relative safety. And so this is something I can do.
Mm-hmm. And could you tell us a little bit about what the process was like running for office as a trans man, even in a district that like is probably more likely to elect a trans man than any other district in Boise? Maybe there's a couple other, but very few.
Yeah, District 16 is very blue. I mean, I think it's been over 10 years since there was a Republican, and there wasn't, but that's how long back I had looked.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the legislators in District 16, which is like West Boise and Garden City, right? They're all Democrats.
Right.
And District 16 was the first district to elect openly gay man. Now, we had an openly queer person elected. That was Cole LaFaver, first ever in Idaho. We've had, and then John McCrosty was elected in District 16.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, Idaho has one out elected person in office, and that's in a city council role.
Oh, wow.
So I did feel like it was a good opportunity, a good place for me to run. And I ran a campaign for, I think, over a year. And it was an interesting experience because I think a lot of people were like, who are you? Like, what? Because I'd been more involved in community advocacy, not political advocacy. So I just kind of like showed up. And I literally walked up to Senator Robbie at this town hall. And I was like, I'm Nikson Mathews and I'm running for office. Like, that was the first time I said it out loud. And I think she was kind of like, who are you? What's happening? Like, nicely, but
what pushed you to do that?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Trans joy is resistance. Trans joy is community. Trans joy is here with our weekly social support group. Join us for a welcoming and affirming space where trans, non-binary, and gender diverse individuals can connect, share, and support one another. We will have peer-led discussions, social connection, and mutual support in a space where you can be heard, celebrated, and uplifted. No RSVP needed, just show up and be you. We'll gather every Thursday from 5 to 7 p.m. at Roots Market. For more info, click on the link in our show notes.
Because I watched HB 71, which was the gender affirming care ban for youth. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching young people see their healthcare being taken away. And it felt like a moment where they're like, what is my future? And I'm like, okay, we need representation in that building. Knocking on doors was interesting. I didn't get elected. I ran through the primary. I came in second out of 4. It was the most competitive primary. I outraised a lot of people, which is a big deal. But, I go knock on doors. And while a lot of people were excited and supportive, I certainly had moments, straight to my face say, well, I'm not going to vote for you because you're a trans person and nobody will take you seriously. You won't be able to get anything done. And these were Democrats, by the way. These are people who, should feel differently. And, we need them to also see, representation is important. Let's make sure we lift that up. So that was disappointing to have that happen.
I'm sure. Yeah. Because it's like we've talked about this before. There are so many traits and characteristics that make you and that make you qualified to run for office. And then they look at one thing that's as trivial to me as like the color of your eyes. And they're like, no, you're not as good because of that. And it's like, are you stupid? Like,
well, and people often want to people always want to say like, why does your transness have to be your whole identity? And it's like, as much as, I think there are times when we can fall into that ourselves. I know I've fallen into that myself, but also the world doesn't let us. They don't let us not be trans.
Exactly.
Like they don't see us not as trans people. Unless we happen to maybe pass or maybe people don't know that about us. It's very rare that we're in a situation in which our transness is not like.
That's true.
Seen, I guess, or part of the.
It's like thrust upon us. Like they'll say both things. Like they'll say you make it your whole identity out of one side of their mouth, and out of the other side they'll be like, that's all you are. Okay, so like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like we're in a losing situation either way.
And I opted to be out it was really important to me to be an out trans person running for office, because I knew it was going to be a hard race, and I knew there would be a good chance I wouldn't win because of who I am.
Right.
And I actually, for me, I felt like it was really important to be out, because I could have
absolutely
just not.
But I thought it was really important, because that was the whole, like, the spirit of the decision. The reason is because we need representation. And I kind of was in this mindset that I thought, I think a lot of people will feel the same. And I was prepared. I showed up. I was ready. I knew the issues.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately that had an impact.
Yeah, I remember meeting you, like, was it like 2 years ago that you moved back to the area, right? Because I think you moved
over 3.
Yeah, like you moved like a little. I remember we kind of met. We met when I first kind of moved back, and I knew you hadn't been here too long, and then it was like next thing I knew you were running for office, and I was like, wow, which was fantastic. It was really great to see, because I think we both felt drawn to come home.
Absolutely.
Because we lived in places where we could have better experiences as trans people, but like I was, and like you were sharing with me, like just drawn to, like, this is my home, and I shouldn't have to leave in order to live here as a trans person. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to, but I am in a place now in which I can come back. I can deal with the shit of being a trans person in public, and hopefully work toward being a part of, like, making it a better place for us, so that people don't have to leave, or those who are unable to leave can hopefully have a better experience.
Absolutely.
Because I know a lot of people want to leave, and it's really complicated. Like, the process of leaving is not easy, like, especially if you're trying to get into a different country, because the rest of the world is like, that's messy. We don't want any of that. It's like, I mean,
well, you're basically leaving like refugees into like other, even if it's just other states or other countries. And so, and I think, like, people don't realize, like, even if you could come up with the money, or you could find a place to land in another, like, maybe, because I know there's things being done to help people move and get to these places. You're still in a new city, a new state, a new place, and you've left your whole, you've mostly had to leave all your friends, all your community in order to kind of go to that. And it's a huge thing, especially in the middle of a transition and everything else.
Well, and you, like, the cost of moving, and then finding an apartment, putting down payments on an apartment, finding a job that you're going to be able to have to pay all of those bills. Like, it is, when I decided to leave, it was shortly after I came out as trans. So I came out first as lesbian, and then later as trans. And it was scary. Oh my goodness. People would say shit to me in the grocery store. I'd be walking my dog down the street. They'd yell at me from their cars.
Oh, wow.
The worst was TSA. I got, took my new ID to the TSA, and the person looked at it. And this was before you would, like, no, that was the same. Never mind. But anyways, they looked at it, they looked at me, they looked at it, and they looked at me. Then they called 2 TSA agents up to escort me through.
Oh, wow.
And it was, and it got worse from there. And it was really a scary experience. So moving felt like a must at that point. And it took me a long time to be able to, I had been planning, I'd been saving, but it took me a long time to make it happen. And it's hard. And it was wonderful. Quite frankly, being in a place that affirms you. I felt safer. But Idaho is my home. I never thought I'd be back here. And here I am, and we love it. And we hate it.
And I'm so glad that you're here too.
It's wild, because I'm from Reno. But I've lived here all of my adult life. So like, when I think back to Reno, I think of like school and being a kid. I don't like it there. I think it's gross. But here I have my life. I have my friends. I have everything I've worked for. And the idea of having to leave, not because I want to and I feel like it's time for me to move on, but because I have to, is terrible.
It is.
And it's really difficult to reconcile that. But you also have to balance, like, well, is it safe to be here?
Right.
Because in my transition, I'm still at that point where people harass me in public. And there are times when, like, I feel like this is not safe. And I know that Idaho, Boise in particular, is much safer than most other places, just because Boise is a safe town.
But even like to take that further, and then maybe this isn't the best question for you, but I've been wondering this for a while because, we now live in a state in which young people don't have access to gender affirming care.
Yeah.
Many adults, including myself, don't have access to gender affirming care any longer.
Right.
They're working on getting ready to pass a bill around making it like around facilities to where trans people can't use the restroom basically in public. There's all these sorts of things that are happening at a state level as well as a national level.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what could a city do? Like, could a city deem itself a sanctuary? And because in a lot of ways, gender affirming care is a life or death situation. I used to do needle exchange work.
Right.
And back in the day, you could get syringe exchange programs to work in cities where it was illegal. If you could get, the city would deem it like an emergency situation,
Right.
in which then people could inject, and then they would give them the stuff, so it can be safer. And, and the police would not, reinforce it. And there was like, the city was on board.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if the city could do something like the city of Boise could do that and help trans folks of all ages access gender affirming care, could pee in public or even just exist in public in Boise.
Right.
It seems like that maybe a city could remove all state funding, remove all federal funding in order to provide care to a very small group of people, but enough in which we could have protections.
Yeah. So I want to talk about a couple things
I know,
to answer that. So the facilities bill, one thing I wanted to know, and this it's a horrifying bill, absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify a couple points in that right now the scope is specific to terribly. So it's specific to like the word is escaping me. So schools. So like post-secondary schools, K through 12. It is specific to I need to bring this up. My brain just like blanked on these correctional facilities. So schools, correctional facilities, and then there was one other. It's not general public.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
It's not impacting private businesses. So that's one of the things. This is like a foot in the door bill, right? And so it has a limited scope right now. And maybe next year they decide to actually increase that. More, so they are not, but just
I'd heard maybe the airport was part of that. Is that true or no?
The airport wasn't on the list.
Okay.
And so I had expected when this bill came up that it would be government facilities, it would be all of these things. Those were not included.
Okay.
It was specific to a set and
like schools and corrections. How about like higher level, like college, university?
So, colleges and universities. And then there was another one, and it's just escaping my mind. But it is not the general public. And so I encourage folks to
DMV
go look at it.
Or
no,
nothing like that. I know I'm just throwing things out there.
Yeah. So what I would encourage folks to do is go read, because it specifically lays out the areas that it is impacting. Still horrifying. It still impacts a lot of people. And it, could open up the door for something more, which we wouldn't be surprised to see, right? So I just wanted to note that.
Of course, and we can share some links in the show
that
notes
would be great.
On how folks can get more information.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
So to the second bill, like, could a city do that? That's a good question. I don't actually think I would like what they would have to do to be able to do that. So we know like state legislature has an impact. So two of the bills going through right now are flag bills that impact schools. So you'll hear sometimes the argument that is coming up is like local control and leaving it to the cities to make these decisions. And so that's a way to like lobby these legislators and say, let's not pass this as a state law. Let's allow cities or school boards to own that. But they're not. But they're passing these bills that impact the entire state.
The entire state, yeah.
I don't know what a city would have to do or if that is possible for a city to do.
Because like Olympia was declared a sanctuary city.
But in Washington state, that has state policies
that
support.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that makes sense that if you pulled all of the government funding, federal funding, it wouldn't matter because it's not state run at all. It would just be a private thing. I feel like theoretically it would work, I think, but I think that's so.
But some of the stuff is like, it's more about litigative. So like some of it is like, maybe it's not like a police officer arresting you, but it is about receiving care from a provider. Or then a lot of the times it's like somebody's getting sued, right, for doing the thing, whether it's like the facilities thing.
So the facilities, this facility.
So then you'd almost have to have like the prosecuting, you know what I mean? Like I think you'd have to have the prosecuting attorney as part of that too, beyond just the police unwilling or not willing to, because there's lots of laws that never go anywhere.
So like, well, let's go back to Olympia as an example. So they declared themselves a sanctuary state. And so what that sanctuary city, and I think Washington in itself, Minnesota has done this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is, say somebody goes into, I'm not a lawyer here, everybody just like, if somebody goes into that state and Idaho decided to pursue that person for XYZ reason, right? They're saying we will not use our funds to help aid in the prosecution or whatever of this person who's come into this place.
Right.
So that's part of it. Now, as far as like a city doing that within a state that has laws passed, I don't know the feasibility on something like that. And like what would actually, that would require the impact on the city. I just don't think that you would see that in a red state. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't understand.
And you'd like almost have to have the clinic in like City Hall or something, because then that's maybe just all funded by because I just feel like there's so much intermixing of like state funding, federal funding, city funding, and everything that there's probably very few places that is just city. Yeah. Because even the streets and the, you know what I mean? Like I just think it would probably be really difficult to.
If possible. Difficult, if even possible.
Yeah.
I would say. But it doesn't mean like, what's interesting then, I mean, that's where we have our city councils, right? So Boise State has gender identity and sexual orientation as a protected identity or a protected class
in our city.
Okay. Statewide, we don't have that. That's the whole Add the Words bill thing, right? Where we tried to get gender identity and sexual orientation into the Idaho Human Rights Act. We weren't able to make that happen. We've got one hearing. That's it. 10 years ago. We've never been able to make that happen.
Almost exactly 10 years ago.
Almost exactly 10 years ago, right? So, but we have many cities in this state that have protections within the city. And that is, then we've got the city level government, so our city councils. And then you look at our school boards. So when you look at some of these bills that are impacting our school or some of the issues impacting our schools, well, school boards have a lot of power with what that school district or that school is doing, right? And so that's the different layers of government. So from the Idaho Queer Caucus standpoint, when we talk about representation, I ran for state legislature, right? But there are so many different positions that we could get representation that would have a real city council, school boards, thinking about
even like
parent
public,
of trans
public libraries.
Public libraries. There's so many different boards or positions that we could have queer people in that could really make a positive impact. And so,
because it's going to take it at all levels.
Yeah. And that's what we need. We need people at all levels to be fighting because they have different kind of focus areas and abilities to impact for good or negative, which, leads to voting.
Yeah.
And we have low voter turnout in the state of Idaho, right? And this is I love your perspective on this. This is something like I recognize and respect the fact that a lot of queer people have a lot of negative feelings about the party system, about Democrats, about elections, about like everything politically that is happening and are divesting from that because they don't see the benefit. And I understand and can respect that. And I'm curious what your perspective is or how you've been seeing things because, it's a topic.
I think I have always been, I've always loved what like our institution and our judicial system. I've always been fascinated by it. And I've always thought that our government was efficient and it was fair. And we have these checks and balances and I respected it. And I lost a lot of hope and faith in our government with the last election, not only because of what happened, but because it seems like they're not fighting for us.
Yeah.
And I feel like regardless of like the party system, it doesn't matter. Like right now, what we have is we've basically got the 2-party system, because we've got the third party, but the way that we're set up, that's never going to fucking happen. And I think a lot of people voted third party to just kind of be like, fuck the system, I'm doing this, I'm trying. Yeah, that too. Yeah. But I mean, it was honestly heartbreaking, because I did always have a lot of faith in our government. I always did. And I just don't anymore. So now I feel kind of lost politically, because before I was always very leftist. So I would always vote Democrat. And now I'm looking at these Democrat officials and I'm like, you guys are,
what are you doing?
What are you doing?
I mean, most of them don't even really stand up for us anyway.
Yeah.
Like they might try to placate us or like try to get us on their side. But when it comes to like a bill or, you know, something actually happening, they're like silent or not very, you know, like, and to me, it doesn't make sense to me, because a lot of times it's like, you're already seen as a Democrat, leftist, liberal, like whatever, because you're not Republican by them. So why are we playing games? Like, why are we trying to make niceties when you're not going to think anything less of me? And I think it's so important for like people who are in office right now to be standing up for us. And we need to see that, and we need to hear that more than anything, even if it falls on deaf ears. Like we need that more than ever. And so I don't understand how, you know, I guess like that lukewarm kind of like support of us is just, it doesn't even make sense to me in my mind that people would be that way. I've always been, for years, I have not participated in voting and those sorts of things. And I didn't even vote for you. And you're on my district. And that was not because I didn't want to vote for you. It was because, well, partly I'm in my transition. My name is still my birth name, and my gender is still my birth gender. And then it's like, so I wasn't sure I could actually go and vote. And so I didn't, and I was scared. So I just didn't even look into it. Yeah. And then after you ran and then you lost, and not to rub it in, and then like when it was time to vote for president, I still wasn't going to vote for president. And then for whatever reason, the last minute, I think I felt like I needed to do something. And I think I actually was starting to see that maybe we needed to try to have some sort of power in the process. And so
I talked a lot of shit.
I went and voted for the first time, and like, it was easy as a tranny. Like, did we say that on the podcast yet?
No, not yet. Not yet. But
not to Nancy Mace.
We say it.
Right. Exactly.
We say it.
Not Nancy Mace.
That's right.
Yeah. But yeah. So and it was actually a lot easier, and they actually even like announced my name as Bonnie Violet, even though I filled out everything properly. They actually misgendered me when I went in and went to vote. They actually put female, and I was like, we need to put male on that, because I know. I don't want my vote to like.
They got your gender right, but
but it wasn't on paper, and so I was like, I realized like I want to make sure that this vote really counts. I don't want somewhere down the road for somebody to decide to have a problem. Yeah, and then at the end when they say, "What is your name?" and they're like, "Oh, Bonnie Violet cast a vote." And I'm like, yes. So
I love that.
So I think for me, I felt a little bit more empowered in some ways, but then also like, I don't know how you do what you do. Right. Because like, I used to think I would be the girl that would go give testimony and testify and do all that stuff. But I just have a really hard time. I see people just spill out their guts and tell everything that needs to be heard. And it just like, it doesn't even care. And if anything, somebody might decide to ask you some asinine questions that are like even worse. And I'm just like, I don't have it in me, I think, anymore to put myself into that. And I don't know how you do it. And we need more people like you, though.
Yeah.
Well,
do you think?
I mean, this is like top. I spend, unsurprisingly, probably like weirdly a lot of time thinking about this. This is on my mind a lot. And, that's part of the work that, here's the plug for the Queer Caucus, the Idaho Democratic Queer Caucus, is like our focus is on the community. And that's how we position ourselves, is we represent the queer community first. We don't represent the Democratic Party first.
Gotcha.
We see our role as one, helping our community like engage and understand this process so they can participate in a way that feels effective, as positive as possible, which is not very positive, right? And safe. Right. And so that's like, some of that is education. Okay, you are a trans person and your documentation doesn't match your gender identity. Here are some of the things that you can do to navigate that, right? The other aspect, and like during the legislative session, a lot of the work that we're doing is talking to legislators and specifically to our Democratic, to the Democratic legislators, and talking to them about, okay, here are the bills. Here's the problems with these bills. Here's, talking points. Here's how, this is what community needs to hear from you. And so that is part building relationship. I do not think that any party or, this kind of political system is our way of getting to liberation. I see this work as harm reduction. And that's how I view it. And that's kind of how I walk into those spaces. Now, testifying, if that is something you want to do and feel good about, do it. If not, it can truly be harmful. So there is never an expectation to go and participate that way.
Well, and I think one of the things that you did recently with the Add the Words rally, and I actually don't know if it was the rally itself, but there was an action prior to the rally that was around the gay marriage situation. And I remember you talking about this as a strategy in the past. But whereas like there was a whole bunch of people who came into like to the hearing, in order to give like testimony, or it was open for public comment. And so they opened it up, and then everyone who was in support of or like against the bill in this particular situation, all the people on our side, they got up and left, which was most like 90 some percent of the people in the room to talk about this bill were our people. And then they got up and left, and then went outside, and then got on social media and kind of gave their testimony there.
So this is kind of an effort that we are, and it's a growing effort. I think this is the first year really kind of like looking at, okay, well, the last couple of years we've been doing testimony. We know people go up, they talk. And I mean, last year we had a couple of hearings where every single person who showed up was in opposition. And we hear in the background, they've gotten hundreds of emails in opposition, and they pass it through with a do pass recommendation. So you literally are walking in and everybody's saying, no, this is bad. And this is, not just queer people. That these are doctors, and these are religious leaders. These are people who, have that perspective as well. Right. And so this year we were kind of like, what can we do differently? And this is a group of people who are working on this. How can we do things a little bit differently and not put people in front to testify when this is such a harmful experience? So that's what came out of that, is this walkout during the marriage memorial.
Because I feel like we might have more opportunity to sway public opinion, especially when we can go out into like our communities and talk about being trans and how these bills or situations are impacting us. So if we can get on social media, if we can talk at our work or our church or those sorts of things, I think it feels like that is another space in which we could share our experience, which I think is a powerful thing for any person to get to do, is to speak our narrative. But I think it's important that it's received, and I love that you were able to like kind of find a way in which people can still testify and put themselves out there in this way, but that it doesn't fall completely on deaf ears, that we can do something more with that. I mean, there's value in just being able to, there's like, is it cathartic to be able to like stand up and do that just for the individual. But also sometimes it feels like, but there's so much, like so many people need to hear that.
And, so, I mean, just right before here, I was down at Roots Cafe. Love Roots.
Love Roots.
Love Roots, everybody.
Yes.
And it was with the District 16 Dems group. And every month they have a coffee there. And so as the queer
What
caucus.
time? No, I'm just joking.
It's 10:30.
Right.
We went. The queer caucus presented and did just that. Essentially, walked through all of these terrible bills, walked through all of these terrible executive orders, and it was really interesting because a lot is happening right now. Right,
Yeah.
like it's hard for anybody to pay attention to one specific thing.
Yeah.
But this is why it's also important for opportunities like this, where we can say focused hour. Here's what's happening to this community, to our community.
Right.
And it was really interesting. I heard some gasps. People didn't quite realize
what was going on.
Truly how terrible it is right now for trans folks and queer folks, right? And then you add immigration on top of that. You add all of the education on top of that, abortion, all of these other aspects, impacts on the disability, all of these things. Right. Like there's so much of it. It's hard to focus, but it's important that people who hold privilege hear it and understand that they have more power. And I've already said this, like I can walk through the state house and have relatives safely because in our community, I hold a lot of privilege. So you got to use it.
Yeah. And we could talk about a lot of different things today. I know we talked about that ahead of time.
Yeah.
But what would you like to say to people that are come across our podcast or watch us about how they can get involved?
Right.
Or like, what would you say to them?
Right. Well, to allies,
look right into the camera. No, I'm
to our allies, like get educated, get informed, follow creators, follow Trans Joy Boise, follow Idaho Democratic Queer Caucus, follow Aaron Reed, follow independent journalists that are talking about these issues and become informed and stop having to rely on trans and queer folks who will continue to provide information. But this is in part learning it for yourself and take action. Today I asked the District 16 Dems, look at of the 11 bills, not all of them are still active, but of the 11 bills that have been introduced, pick 2 that aren't the marriage memorial, because let's be honest, terrible, but this is not the highest level of, it's concerning, but it's not where they attack. 14 Republicans voted against the marriage memorial in the House.
Yeah.
It's not the most pressing. So pick 2 outside of that, reach out to your legislators and let them know you do not have a problem peeing next to a trans person, let them know you're okay with trans people being in your space, queer people being in your space, and you want them in Idaho. And then to community, find community. This is a time to do and prioritize your health and your needs and finding joy to give you the energy for tomorrow. Know that there are trans people who live into adulthood, that there is a future and our future is in our community. And
you both got older.
On
the same day.
On the same day.
Think about trans people getting older.
It's important. As queer people, we have gone through so many different moments. The AIDS crisis 10 years ago with Add the Words, so many different things. We've made it through it. It was absolutely horrible. Not everybody did, right? But this is where community comes in and takes care of each other. And you can grow up and you can grow old. That's my big concern, is people who don't see themselves
totally
in the future.
Because it's, we've talked about it, how we don't want to focus on resilience. We wanted to focus on the positivity, but
life and living.
But you can't always, it is an asset. It's a strength that we have, and we are resilient. We will get through this, but in order to get through this, we need to be focusing on the things that bring us joy, like love, community, really making sure that we are taking care of our mental health, because like you said, this isn't a sprint. This is a marathon. We're going to be in this for quite some time, for the foreseeable future. And I think getting, with your community and going to events and just making a safe space for yourself to kind of
Absolutely.
navigate the next few years
Right.
is going to be how we get through it.
100%.
Yeah. And joy and like living life and happiness and exuberance and all that sort of stuff. I mean, you can look at movements over decades and see that like some of the most marginalized and most resilient people, they know how to like, they're creative as fuck. They know how to have a good time. They sing and dance like,
absolutely,
like, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
I'm like, and I think that we have to tap into that just as much. Like, that's one thing that we can learn from the people who've come before us in helping us to get through what is and what is going to continue to be a difficult time to exist as trans people.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, it's important. It's just as important as like going to our jobs or getting our documentation or having like escape plans or like all these sorts of things. Like, it's just as important for us to carve out time to just be in community with one another, wrapped around fun things, or just nothing. Just sitting on the couch.
Just sitting on the couch. That was wonderful. I was sitting on the couch with you for like 3 hours.
I know, it's so great. It was really cool.
And that's how we build up our ability to continue to do the work that we need to, because there's that side of it, but it can't be our whole identity. And I'm learning that. I am not great at that. And I think that there's a lot of us who can kind of struggle. We're just like, okay, even the people who are making joy for others, right?
It's like go. But
Oh yeah. I mean, that's why I enjoy getting to have time with you. I mean, I enjoy you anyway, but it's nice to be able to like be with another trans person who's kind of, you know, in this position in community,
right?
Because it takes a lot, you know, and I'm not bitching about it,
right?
Like, but there are challenges with being in the positions that we're in that kind of sometimes make us feel outside of community, or it's hard for us to connect with community in a way that doesn't feel like we're having to be something, you know, whatever. We're having to be strong, we're having to be joyous, we're having to be, which sometimes can be not authentic, right? You know what I mean? Totally. And so like it's easier when we can, I think, be with community in any capacity, but I think also especially with folks who are doing the work, to just kind of like let your guard down and not feel like you have to be something 100%, or in some way in order to have a positive impact on like the people around you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And that, I mean, there's a lot of people who are like trying to come into organizing or who have been organizing. And I think this is forcing us all to kind of look at this and say, okay, how do we do this work that is going to be sustainable and also enjoy it? And like, how do we also bring our resources together? We are a community with limited resources. That is just the reality. And so, you know, I also would just invite people who want to get involved in this work, reach out to the organizations in your area and see how you can plug in, because doing this work alone is too hard. And so always connecting where you can, and let's like band together our resources, because what that does is it makes it possible when you get tired, well, that somebody else could step forward and vice versa. And that's what comes with like working with community.
And that feels like an organic place to kind of remind people to join the wait list for the app that for the community that we have coming up, because that is an effort for us to just kind of compile all of the resources that we have for anything trans and non-binary related in this community for people to access.
Right. And a safe container in which for that to happen, for us to be able to, I think, provide mutual aid for one another, to show up for one another in real ways and in ways that feel, because, you know, just on social media, just out in just out in public, we don't always have that sort of space in which we can be a little bit more vulnerable and connect in the ways that we need to connect in order to, you know, grow.
We could put the link for that in the description.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
I think that's good. That was.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
Thank you for having me on. This was lovely. I always enjoy hanging out, talking about stuff.
As I tear the place out.
Thank you for being here. It was really fun.
Yeah, and thank you all for joining us, listening to us, or watching us. And see you in the next episode.
See you next week.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Sweet. Big news, Boise. We're building something incredible. A private community for Trans Joy Boise is set to launch next month. This is your chance to sign up and get in on the ground floor. We are creating a space for connection, support, and growth, and we are looking for members who want to be a part of something special and professionals passionate about hosting webinars, leading in-person events, moderating discussions, and sharing expertise to enrich the trans community. If this sounds like you or someone you know, don't wait. Fill out our form located in the show notes and help us add value to this vibrant space before we officially open the doors.